Hello, my name is Chris Lemaire. I'm a programmer at the American Cinematheque, and I'm thrilled to present this special Q&A focused on two Academy Award nominated films, Judas and the Black Messiah and the documentary film Time. We're very happy to have the two filmmakers, Shaka King and Garrett Bradley, both joining to discuss their craft and these two wonderful films. The conversation is moderated by Gayle King, who is the co-host of CBS This Morning and also the editor-at-large of O, the Oprah magazine. Before we start, I just want to thank all our American Cinematheque members tuning in. We truly couldn't continue to put these events on without you, so we're so grateful for your continued support. If you're not a member, I encourage you to go to our website, americancinematheque.com, to find out about all the exclusive perks that come with it, and also how it supports our mission here at the Cinematheque. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Gayle and welcome the two filmmakers.
I am very excited about this conversation. Shaka and Garrett, I welcome you both because I've watched both of your movies, both your documentary and Shaka, your movie, and both of them have set with me the next day. Shaka, I remember calling you to talk about it. Garrett, I can't tell you how moved I was. So let's start with you introducing yourselves. Garrett, you go first. You are who and what do you do?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Garrett Bradley. I directed the documentary feature Time, and I'm so pleased to be here with you all. Thank you.
And you have an Academy Award nomination. Let's not forget this. The film was also selected as one of Barack Obama's top films of the year, which, by the way, matters to me. And you won the Best Director Award in the documentary competition in Sundance. So go you. Shaka King, hello. You
Hi.
are?
My name is Shaka King. I'm the director, the co-writer, and one of the producers of Judas and the Black Messiah.
So I want to start with, Shaka, I want to start with you with Judas and the Black Messiah. I saw it on HBO Max, but it's my understanding you now can see it on demand or in the theaters.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start with that movie because when I was done, I was embarrassed that I didn't know this story. And then I started asking people, and I wasn't the only one that didn't know about Chairman Fred.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know so much about the Black Panther Party, or we think we do. I take that back. We think we do. And we think of the Black Panther Party, many people do, as a militant organization, but there's so much more to the story than that.
Mm-hmm.
True?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What was the story you wanted to tell?
Well, there were a number of stories I wanted to tell. There was the desire, like I think you alluded to correct the record of who the Black Panthers were, put forth their ideas and their politics in their full complexity as much as possible. There was the desire to humanize these icons and Chairman Fred and Naku and Najeri, and really highlight the sacrifices that they made as young people, because they really did make, tremendous sacrifices. And I think there was also a desire to, in a lot of ways, look at, two really different definitions of freedom and power.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I think Chairman Fred and William O'Neill had, in some ways, both had a desire for freedom and power, but had different definitions of what those things were and different ways of going about attaining them.
Well, how about this? What's the typical impression people have about the Black Panther Party? They are what? And in reality, what is Chairman Fred's interpretation of the Black Panther Party?
I think I think a lot of people's, concept of what the Black Panther Party was that they were a highly militant, there are even people out there who use the terminology terrorist organization to describe them, which couldn't be further from the truth. They were actually very much an anti-terrorist organization in the sense that, the government was really the terrorist organization that they were interested in, addressing. What they were they were a group of young community activists and organizers who were interested in, feeding poor people, building medical clinics, providing, poor and working class folks with the services that, the U.S. government is supposed to provide.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't.
Mhm. And the FBI went above and beyond the call of duty to try to shut them down. We'll get to that in just a second. Garrett, we were also talking about the story, talk about humanity and sacrifice. Boy, does that check all the boxes when we talk about time. I was so moved by this story because I think, many people think, hey, if you do the crime, then you do the time. And let's just say we all know that they did the crime. They admitted that,
Yes.
the people in your story. But there's so much more to this story. Can you set the scene for us? It's a love story like nothing I've ever heard before.
Yeah, thank you. I think the film, first and foremost, as you said, is a love story that's really centered around, the family matriarch, Fox Rich, who spends over 2 decades, 21 years in fighting to reunite her family, up against all odds, up against an entire system. And I think that for me, the entry point for that was through love, was through unity, was through self-definition, which were these things that both her and her husband, Robert, who was incarcerated in Angola for 21 years, and Miss Peggy, her mother, and all 6 of her sons, illustrate as a type of resistance. The film, I feel like, is a real celebration of what resistance looks like in the everyday, and that it is rooted actually in a place of joy, of resilience, and of strength.
And
Victimhood.
let's talk about the crime. And they both admit in the movie, Fox makes it very clear. Yes, the crime was they were desperate. They wanted to open up a store. They robbed a bank. They all admit that we were wrong. We screwed up. I think he says desperate people do desperate things.
Yes.
The thing that's so egregious here is that he was sentenced from, what was it? He could have gotten anywhere from 9 to 99 years or something outrageous like that.
Yeah.
He ended up being sentenced to how many years?
60 years. 60 years. A numerical life sentence is what they call it.
No shots were fired.
Mm-hmm.
No shots were fired.
No, it was a first-time offense.
It was a first-time offense.
Mm-hmm.
No one was killed. And this man was sentenced to 60 years.
Yes.
And so Fox went on a journey to call attention to the injustice. She also served time. She was driving the getaway car.
Yes.
She spent something like 3 years in prison or something.
Yes, 3 years.
And on her own raised 6 sons. Tell me where, she has a great line where she says in the movie about love is life's only valid expression. Tell us about her, about Fox Rich.
Yeah, and actually that was Robert. Robert is the one who
said that. Okay.
Talks about love. It's funny because I think Fox herself would say, she did not raise her 6 sons on her own, even though their father, Robert, was incarcerated and wasn't physically present. They made a promise to themselves as a couple that they were not going to let the system separate them. And we have to understand that, the systematic separation of Black and brown families is a part of American history. It's been there since the inception of the New World, since the beginning of America. And so remaining together, unity, again, becomes a type of resistance. And they made sure that Robert was a part of their daily life through visitation, through phone calls. He knew what was going on in their life and he was an active participant in it. And so was Miss Peggy, Fox's mother, who was there caring for the children when both parents were incarcerated, and was a big part of the emotional stability and the practical stability of the entire family.
I love the scenes with Miss Peggy because she really is, talk about tells it like it is. It was extremely candid.
Yes.
How old was Fox at the time when she was sent away and when she came out of prison?
She was in her 20s. She was in her early 20s. Mm-hmm.
And Shaka, how old was Fred Hampton?
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about when he was assassinated, he was 21 years old.
Yeah, Chairman Fred was 21. Yeah.
And when he, co-founded the Illinois chapter, he was 20 years old. So everything you see in the movie takes place in 1 year.
Yeah, so tell us about his backstory, because I marvel at someone who was able to do this at 20 and 21 and how he got on the FBI's radar and they were determined to take him down and talk about any means necessary. It's
he was on their radar from age 14. His phone was tapped at age 14, which is insane to kind of imagine. But he was very active in community politics from a young age. You know, he was an NAACP youth leader at 16 years old, and he was, you know, attempting to integrate, you know, a fairly segregated school in Proviso East High School, and really, you know, just get like the white students and the black students on the same page, because there was major race relations there, and he was effective at it. So he was you know, an effective community organizer and orator, you know, as a kid.
At 14, the FBI he was on their radar at 14?
14 years old, yeah.
Wow. And I think it's interesting what you said, that he, even back then, was trying to unite people. Back then is what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't the FBI want someone like that? I would think that they'd think, now, this is somebody we can get behind, someone who's trying to unite people.
I wouldn't think that would be what the FBI would be wanting to do at all. That's not the FBI. I know.
No, but when I think about, you know, you would think that instead of trying to separate the races, you would think that here's somebody who clearly has everyone's ear. People are paying attention to him at the age 14, 15, 16. But what they did that I thought was so egregious is that they used his own people, Chairman Fred's own people, his own friends, against him. Could you talk about that?
They did. I mean, they used all types of means. That was just one methodology in terms of, you know, trying to crush these voices of dissent. They used informants, you know, they used prison, which was incredibly effective, you know, talking about a movie like Time. You know, they would arrest Panthers for broken taillights for nothing. And, you know, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. talks about the fact that, you know, there were times that, you know, women in the Illinois chapter were far more prevalent than men, just because the men were constantly being locked in prison, intentionally by the state, you know, to separate them from their comrades. You know, and they obviously used guns, you know, as the end of the movie demonstrates. You know, they used military might.
Let's talk about O'Neill, because I thought he was an interesting character. How old was he?
Bill O'Neill, he was 17 when he stole the car.
17, okay.
When he got entrapped by the FBI, he was ensnared in the trap. He was about 17 years old.
And they said to him, what did they say to him to get him to flip?
Well, they were very, you know, they seduce you. So it starts with, you know, you can go home if you just go to a few meetings and listen to what these people are saying and observe. And if you see something, just keep track. And so, you know, that doesn't sound like, that's not the same as go and infiltrate this organization and, you know, take part in this assassination plot because we're gonna someday kill this man. That wasn't how they laid it out to him. They laid it out to him, you know, they gave him a very simple task. And then, you know, as time went on, their requests/demands became more and more involved and dangerous.
And as time went on, he seemed to be uncomfortable with the request. Was he in real life? Was he?
It's tough to say. There's only one interview with him. And in the interview, he contradicts himself. He's clearly lying. He tells many, many lies. So I don't know how much internal turmoil he had as a young man. But, you know, when you look at that interview and you see just the turmoil that he's wrestling with as an older man, you know, I mean, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if all that stuff hit him later in life. You know, I think as a young man, he
all
probably,
that stuff. What, say again? All that stuff.
all that and all that angst. It wouldn't surprise me if that stuff hit him later in life, and that as a young man, he just enjoyed the fruits of, you know, going to these steakhouses and eating with Agent Mitchell and drinking his whiskey and buying, you know, suits with the money that he earned as an informant. But I do think that, you know, when he was confronted with just the carnage that he caused, the physical carnage that he caused, you know, based on things that I've read and accounts that I've heard, I do think that it affected him in some way.
Yeah.
Seeing the murder scene, I think, affected him.
Yeah. How could it not? Yeah. The final half hour of your film is very, very difficult. The thing that struck me, Garrett, about both films is that you saw Black life, you saw Black love, and you saw Black humanity. That's the thing that struck me so much about Fox Rich, her undying love for her husband, for her children, and the inhumanity of how she was treated by the system, how she would just dutifully call, checking in to say, has a judge made a decision? Have you heard anything? And to be met with such indifference by a woman on the other side of the phone who you could tell seemingly gave zero shits about what was going on in her life, and how she just had to suck that up and take that and be respectful while she's on the line, because this person who you don't know and doesn't know you and doesn't care is literally holding your life in their hands. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, and it's the experience again of 2.3 million American families right now, you know, and it of course, you know, one person might be incarcerated, but it's an echo effect, you know, it has a ripple effect over, you know, many generations, you know, so it's really, you know, double, quadruple, triple that number of folks that are serving time, you know, when we include those that are on the outside. And I think, you know, I think that those phone calls were really important in humanizing the experience of what it is that so many people have to go through, what kind of persistence it takes to just get basic information, and how performance to a certain extent, right? The way in which we speak, the way in which we have to present ourselves in order to get basic information, basic respect is a part of the American experience. But I think it is also, when we think about the Black experience, performance for us in some spaces, and I actually think, Shaka, it's a really interesting contrast to the resistance to this very thing that I'm talking about of performance, which in my mind embodies both oppression and resistance all at once, right? What does it mean to have to go in front of a parole board for 2 decades every year and speak exceptionally, look exceptional, be exceptional, you know? That is what Fox had to endure. But I think that she is not a victim. She refused to be a victim. And everybody in the family is an individual. Everybody in the family loves themselves, defines themselves, is not defined by the system, you know? And we see that in their own unique ways, again, all the way from Miss Peggy to Fox herself to all 6 of her sons. And so I think those scenes were really important so that people could really contextualize and understand what it takes. If you can imagine being at the grocery store and being impatient for having to wait 10 minutes or 5 minutes, you know, or calling, you know, to pay your phone bill, we get so impatient, right? But that's a privilege to be impatient. That's a privilege to be able to express yourself the way you actually feel, you know?
Yeah, I never think of it that way, but it is. It's a privilege to be impatient. Because
Mhm.
you know what? It shows you have options.
Mhm.
You have options. Shaka, I see you shaking your head when Garrett was talking about oppression and resilience.
And performance too, just like not even performance, but you know, you look at that family in Fox Fish and her children, you're like, man, how perfect do you have to be?
Yeah.
Like those, they're beyond exceptional. Like it's one of the things that's like most striking about that movie. You watch it and you're just like, man, like this is like true excellence. And it's literally to survive, to subsist,
Yeah.
you know? Is she able to pull that off if there's any, like, I mean, you're looking at like, it's kind of nuts watching that family. You're just like, you all have to be so perfect just to get basics, like basics. It's kind of nuts, you know?
Yeah. Your movie is also a love story too, Shaka.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you talk about that? I mean, I sort of, it was, there's a beautiful scene where he finds out that she is pregnant of a baby that he never got to see. But can you talk about their love story?
Yeah, you know, it was important to, I think, make that like a big part of the film, you know, for a number of reasons. I think one, because it was real, you know, they did have a real love in the short amount of time that they got to know one another in this life. But also, you know, I recognized that we were putting particularly like, you know, our Black viewers through like intense trauma in having to watch a film like this. And so that love story is an opportunity to just balance the viewing experience And also, I think it crystallizes the loss of Chairman Fred, not just Chairman Fred, the leader, but Chairman Fred, the would have been husband, the would have been a father to his child who, was excited about those prospects. And so, it was important to put that in there and to really feature it in a big way.
Do you think Chairman Fred was prepared to die? Do you think he lived life knowing that he could die at any moment? Because he did seem fearless to me.
They all of them did. All of the Panthers did. When you talk to them, they talk about how they, there's that famous line from Huey Newton, I believe. He says, like, a revolutionary's life ends one of three ways, death, prison, or exile. And,
yes.
They accepted that, they embraced it, and they didn't fear death. And Chairman Fred, without question, didn't fear death at all.
Mm-hmm. Garrett, I was struck by your movie, all of the archival footage that you had. I just thought, when did you know that you had that treasure trove? Was it something as you were planning the movie that you were incorporating it as you went along?
Yeah, no, I was convinced that I was making a 13-minute short film because I had made another film called Alone with the New York Times Op Docs, which is actually how I developed a relationship with Fox, was in the process of making that film. And is also looking at
you met her in that movie, Alone. Okay.
Yes, yeah, and it's also looking at incarceration from a Black woman's point of view, from a family's point of view, and really the impetus for that for me was to facilitate intergenerational conversations between women who were in incarcerated families to offer support to one another. And I contacted an organization called FLIC, Friends and Families of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children. And Gina Womack, who's the co-founder and director of that organization, said the first person you need to speak with is Fox Rich. So Fox is briefly in that film. And so I was like, okay, I want to make a sister film to this. I want to, obviously there's an absence and a void in talking about this issue from this perspective. It was, our last day of filming. I remember saying to Fox, I'll be back in a few months and I'll show you a cut. And she handed me a bag of what ended up being 100 hours of her own personal home archive, which she herself had not seen since she shot it in the 90s. And I had to completely
wait. On the last day, you go, okay, I'll be back with my 13-minute movie.
Yeah.
And then she says, oh, by the by, I've got this.
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
God.
And I mean, Fox is somebody, she's a leader in her community. She does the live, she's live here, she's live there. Like, I knew that using media was a part of, was a tool for her that she understood the power of, you know what I mean? But I did not know what this was. I did not know that this existed. And it really forced us, obviously, to rethink the structure of it. I knew it wasn't going to be 13 minutes any longer, but my intention for wanting to make the film was not going to change. And I think that that's a really important distinction, because on one hand, it's like your dream come true. It's also your worst nightmare. But what is the anchoring point? Because when you're making a documentary, it's honoring the present moment. It's knowing, in fact, anticipating anything becomes unethical. So what is the thing that's anchoring me every day in what I'm shooting and how I'm shooting it? Knowing the answer to that doesn't change once I'm in the edit, I
know, but Garrett, didn't you have to totally go back to the drawing board? If you think you have a 13-minute film of what you've shot, and then you have this, it's gold, this archival footage. It's gold.
Yes, it is.
A young woman, and to see her boys as they're born, and to see her frustration and feel her hope and feel her anger in real time. And you have that. Oh my
yes. God. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I think the way I think about it is, part of our medium when we're making films across any genre, we're working in two-dimensional space. We're telling stories one frame at a time, right? And when I was shooting the film with the understanding that it was going to be a short film, my focus was on their version of hope, their version of resistance in their daily ritual life and routine, right? And there were certain things that I knew to be true. I knew that Fox was a free spirit. I knew that she had evolved from being Sybil to becoming the matriarch that I met, 18 years into her husband's incarceration. But how do you prove that? And I think that question becomes really interesting when you think about just the challenge again, two-dimensional space, because life is in 360 degrees. Life is a circle. Life is holistic. And so the archive almost became this other half of the circle. It helped me prove and create evidence for everything that I knew to be true. And I also think for Fox herself, it was a recreation of the American dream. It was a recreation of, or I should say, an addition or an extension of our concept of what being a wholesome family is. Yeah. It was a type of therapy for her. And I think more than anything, you know, it was also a real testament to her lack of doubt as a woman. And that's incredible because, you know, as I mentioned to you, doubt at our worst moments is the thing that we are sometimes led by, you know?
Her lack of doubt, yeah.
I gotta, so because you said something interesting about, repeat that thing about anticipation, something about how you don't, because I was so curious about, because one of the things that blew my mind about this film is how the craft is so strong visually. The camera's always exactly where the camera should be, which, you know, I mean, I can count the number of documentaries on my hand where the aesthetics of the film matched the subject in the sense that, you know, it's you're talking about a person in Fox who moves with a lot of grace, and the filmmaking has that level of grace to meet her, which is so impressive. And you watch and you're like, how to know that you didn't anticipate. I'm just like, well, how did you do that then?
I mean, thank you for that. I mean, I think that it's a matter of knowing people and having real relationships with them when you're making something so that you aren't chasing them. I knew how Fox moved through her space. I knew how she moved through that office, you know? I think it also was rooted to this thing of like, when I asked them as a family, when we had these questions, why do we want to make this film? What is it that we want to say? And they were very clear. Our story is the story of 2.3 million American families, and we feel that our story can offer hope. And so my job, I felt like as a director and as a filmmaker, was to distill hope from its abstraction and say, well, what does that look like in cinematic terms? What does that look like in actionable terms in their life, right? And so that is how I knew where I needed to be and how I needed to be there.
I think you really captured it beautifully. I'm curious for you, Shaka. How did you get to know Chairman Fred? Did you rely on conversations with his family, with his wife and his son? Did you rely on looking at archival footage? How did you get to know him?
You know, it's all of the above. I mean, I think, you know, two things. One, obviously you read all the books you can get your hands on, all the articles, watch as many documentaries, listen to as many speeches. Oral history plays a big role in terms of talking to people who knew him.
He had a very distinct cadence that I thought Daniel really captured beautifully.
Very, very, very distinct. But you know, the sort of other half of that is that when you're making a, you know, piece of historical fiction, your imagination fills in the blanks. And in a lot of ways, you're making Chairman Fred the character. So who you see when you see Gayle, you know, play this role is our interpretation of this individual, but it's not the individual.
I mean, did you consult with his family while you were making the movie? Did you?
You know, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. was on set every day.
Oh, he was, okay.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to get this movie made for you, with studios and negotiations and getting people to say, yeah, I want to make sure people get to see this?
You know, I don't know, because I've never had the experience of making a studio film. You know, I hear about movies taking 10, 20 years, and our movie took 4 years to get made, which doesn't feel like that long. You know,
how long did it take to get it made? How long?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem long.
In the moment, you know, you're always like, I hope it's gonna go. You know, feels like it's gonna go. But you just kind of take it step by step and move through it step by step. So
how did it come to you? How did it come to you, Shaka? Did someone bring you the screenplay? Was it something you heard about? How did this movie come to you? I don't know.
Pitch. It was a pitch from the Lucas brothers, two comedians, friends of mine, and they said, we want to make a movie about Fred Hampton and William O'Neill.
Did you know who that was?
I knew who Fred Hampton was. I didn't know who William O'Neill was.
Okay.
And they said that they envisioned it as The Departed set inside the world of COINTELPRO. And I was like, I think that's a brilliant way to make this movie, and I'm in.
I'm in. And for you, Garrett, how was it that you said, I'm in?
Oh, the universe did that for me. I didn't really have much. It happened organically, you know.
Like the universe does that. When you were making the movie, did you know that Rob was going to get out? Did you know that?
No, of course not. I mean, I think, and you know,
I wasn't sure if that was something, because it was so beautiful when he gets out.
Yeah.
So you didn't know as you were going along with it whether you were going to actually see him get out of prison.
No, and I think it's a great question, because on one hand, you know, something I learned from Fox was the power of manifestation. And so it was never if, it was when, right? That's how we always spoke about it. And I was holding that, you know, as we were filming. And I wanted success. I wanted them to be united, whether or not we would be able to have that in the film, right? And so
were you just going to film X amount and then say, well, we're going to end it here? If you weren't planning to see his ultimate release, did you have an end where we're going to film up to X amount and then that'll be our story?
No, I mean, I think this is part of the beauty of making documentaries, is that it's kind of like when the money runs out, it stops, you know, and then you kind of have to piece it all together from there. And like, my focus was at that point, not knowing again what was going to happen. I just knew, and this was again my intention, how do I show hope? How do I show their resilience? And if that's the only thing people take away from it, we will have done our job.
So tell us the moment when you heard that he was going to get out and you were going to be able to film it.
Well, so there was a parole board hearing that happened that myself and several other members of the film team were there for, in support of, as family and friends. Cameras were not allowed in that. But that is when he was granted parole. And so, you know, it was, on one hand, you know, oddly, I think it's something that takes time to believe, you know, even once he was physically released, there's such a healing process that needs to happen. You know, it's not like the same kind of cathartic release, at least for me. I mean, I think certainly for the family that was felt, but even so, they're going through a healing process, you know, right now. And it still took, Gayle, several weeks for him to even be physically released. The bureaucracy, those phone calls did not stop even once we knew that he was going to be getting out, right? Then it was a matter of figuring out, well, when exactly, what time, how do we coordinate? How does Fox even just get basic information about when that's going to happen?
And so you say, we're going to be there. And then you say, what is the question you ask her after you say, we're going to be there? Now what? What are you saying to her?
Well, I think we had a lot of conversations about, again, when, not if, when Robert comes home, what's going to happen, you know? And I knew that it was going to be really important that we were in the car with them. I just, you know, no matter what.
She told you we're going to, the minute we get in the car, she said that?
I mean, we would talk about it. She was like, you know, because, and I think in a more grounded way, you know, intimacy has also become a privilege in our country, right? And when I was making the short film Alone, that was also, again, talking about incarceration from the point of view of love, right? That was a really difficult thing for me to try to illustrate. We're in a visual medium, you know, somebody can explain that, but it wasn't until I think that very last scene, that was sort of our last attempt as a team, as a film, to say, look at what's been lost for 21 years.
Garrett, it was so sensual and so loving. I mean, and she said, the minute I see him, I want to have sex with him. And you said, we're going to film it. And she said, okay.
Well, I said, can we be in the car with you no matter what happens? Can we be there, right?
No matter
And
what
so,
happens.
yes, and so Nissa East, who was one of our DPs on the project, she was in the passenger seat, and I was in my little Honda Civic, 2003 Honda Civic, which I love, gold, behind.
They are reliable cars. Those Hondas are very reliable.
They were reliable, and I was like swerving, trying to catch up. And I just said to Nissa, shoot it in slow motion because we're not going to get it any other way because it's going to be a rocky ride. And it's energy work. What we do is energy work, right? Like even if it's scripted, even if it's documentary, you be in tune with them. If they're giving you energy, turn off the camera, right? And that was something that everybody understood. And I think the most important thing, Gayle, too, that I want to emphasize, especially for other documentarians out there, or young people who are making films, our craft is in communication. Directing is an art of communication, and being really clear about our intentions and why we want to make certain choices. And so it wasn't about me saying we're going to be in the car. It was about, what does it mean if we are in the car, and how can that serve this larger story that we're all on board for?
I see, because I tell you, I was watching, I thought, now, is this archival or did they recreate it? Or, I'm telling you, I was sitting there, I was confused. I really was. And then I just thought, wow, are they actually there in the car? Shaka, as a filmmaker, you knew exactly what it was, right?
I knew that they were in the car, and I knew it was real. It was too real a moment to, know there was nothing fake about that moment.
Yeah, but I thought they're not actors, but I thought it was, I just thought it was such a beautiful scene.
It was beyond beautiful. And it was also just a testament to the trust that Garrett established with them.
Very good point.
Which, was, again, one of the things that, crystallized for me, just the amazing work that she did.
Yeah.
That's, you gotta be not just a good filmmaker, but you gotta be a good person to get that kind of, for someone to let you in that way. And, and also someone who's very incredibly smart. That's one of the, you come away from that movie like, this woman is such a force, and just one of the smartest, most powerful people I've really ever seen, in a film. So for her to give Garrett that level of access, just was a testament to her, really her power as a filmmaker.
I love what you just said. Number one, you have to be a good human being, and it shows how much she trusted Garrett.
Yeah.
I was curious, Garrett, about your take on Judas and the Messiah, because I know that you've seen it.
I've watched it a few times, actually. And, I think that, what is that film, Zabriskie Point, the Antonioni film, Zabriskie Point? Mm-hmm. I think it's very difficult to try to make work that really evokes the now while speaking to something that is from the past. And I think that for me, no matter how many times I see the film, I am understanding the history that has been made invisible to me, but I am also feeling incredibly activated in the present moment. And I think that has to do with the craft, that has to do with you innovating formats, performance, lighting, movement of the camera. There are so many things that are working together to help achieve that. And I think that is no small feat, because it's very easy for us to watch films in a sort of passive experience and separate ourselves from it, And I think you, Shaka, have been able to do something that is so activated, and that one cannot separate themselves from the present moment, even though this happened, 50 years ago, roughly?
68, yeah. I know it is interesting how it's still, Shaka, is so timely today, timely and timeless. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty heartbreaking to me, that many of the things that Chairman Fred is talking about, we are still dealing with as we sit here today, especially as we sit here today.
All of
the backdrop of the Derek Chauvin trial, for the murder of George Floyd. It just, on so many levels. What were you going to say?
No, I was saying all of the things that he's literally, say every single thing that the Panthers were railing against is still a problem for us, for this world.
So I'll end with this with both of you. What do you hope people that see your movies walk away with? I want you first, Garrett, on this.
I think that the film is making a case not for innocence, but of forgiveness. And I think that forgiveness is not at the bedrock of the world that we live in. There is something else that has structured the world globally, right? And I think that if there's one thing that I'm hoping people can connect with, it is the human experience. It is questioning the value of human life. And it is the role that forgiveness plays, not only in this story, but in one's own personal life, and how if we can start to center ourselves in that, if we can have an imagination, imagine being somebody besides ourselves, that individual thought of compassion and openness is what then has a ripple effect, hopefully globally, in our whole world.
Mm-hmm. Shaka?
A number of things. One obviously is I hope that this, to me, is, for people who don't know anything about this history, it's an entry point.
Yeah.
And above all, like, it's really just an entry point into who Chairman Fred was, who the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party was, who the Black Panthers were on the whole. I also think that, there's on the William O'Neill side of things, I think it's a movie that's about the dangers of being apolitical. His apoliticism, not only led to the assassination of Chairman Fred, but it also led to his own personal demise.
Do you think he took his own life, Shaka?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I've heard, many. He was such a complicated guy, and had so many secrets that when you hear stories about him faking his own death, as I've heard, you can't help but wonder if that was the case. But I do think he was tortured, whether he went through with suicide or not. I do think he was tortured. And I think another kind of important thing to take away from the film is just this idea that they can't stop us. You look at Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. And the work that he's doing in the same neighborhood that his father worked and his mother worked in. He's still out here, and he has a very big presence, and he's continuing his father's legacy and his mother's legacy. So I think that's another takeaway as well.
Well, I think you're so right. It's such an important point to make, that you hope that it will be an entry point. It was certainly that for me. And then I became embarrassed. I was actually embarrassed. After I watched it, then I started Googling, then I started looking up old clips, and then I started reading, and it just took me to another place just to want to know for myself, and embarrassed that, so many of us don't know this story. And it's such an important story to tell. And I'm so grateful that you have told it so beautifully on the screen. Will you be going to the Oscars?
Yeah, I'm going.
All right. And what will you be wearing, Mr. King?
Gotta wait and see.
Garrett Bradley, will you be going to the Oscars?
I am. We will be. Yeah, it'll be fun.
If you win, and I don't even like to say when you win, you will be the first Black female to win an Oscar for directing. So please know that I'm cheering you both on, waving all of my Garrett and Shaka pom-poms. Thank you both. Thank you both for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gayle.
So much. Thank you, Shaka.
Thank you, Garrett. Looking forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah.